ChatGPT can now see, hear, and speak thanks to two big new updates. So, first, ChatGPT can now analyze and respond to images. So, you just drop a photo or a picture into it and then start prompting it to do things with that image. For instance, Kevin Roose at the New York Times tested prompts like, tell me what this object is in my junk drawer, summarize the front page of the newspaper by just giving it a photo of the paper, or write Facebook Marketplace listings for these photos I'm giving you. And he said it actually did a pretty good job doing all three of those things. The second big update is that ChatGPT can now talk to you just like Siri or Alexa. So you just speak to it via the app and ChatGPT responds. So Roose again kind of put it through its paces and did things like have it read a bedtime story to his child. It helped him analyze a dream he had by talking it through with him. And it actually conversed with him about some work-related stress that he was having. And really notably, he said it's way better than Siri or Alexa and that it sounds much more natural and actually feels like you're having an open-ended, useful conversation out loud with a machine assistant. Now, most users don't yet have access to all these features. They've just been made available to some early testers, but they're soon going to be rolled out to ChatGPT Plus and ChatGPT Enterprise users. Somewhat related at the same time, we also got an announcement that ChatGPT is now able again to connect to the internet. Now, OpenAI had shut down this feature for some time after I believe ChatGPT was scraping websites it did not have any business scraping and
Breaking
reading
paywalls.
paywalled content. But now you can, as a ChatGPT Plus user, access these features again. So first up, Paul, kind of talk to me about this ability to analyze images. How can I start using something like this to my benefit as a marketer or a business leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the back of the Dolly 3 announcement, so if you didn't catch last week's episode or missed that news, so we just had Dolly 3, the next version of their image generation technology is going to be infused into ChatGPT. So you're going to be able to create images with text prompts. And then like 2 days later, they announce all these other capabilities where it can analyze images and it can talk to you. And I think the broader thing to understand here is we are seeing the next generation of these language models starting to roll out through these changes. So Google Bard has had this capability, like you could give images to Google Bard, but as we've talked about previously, like for some reason, Google's models just aren't there yet. They're not as capable as what we're seeing with OpenAI at the moment. I expect that will change this fall, but right now, the reality is ChatGPT is just an insanely powerful tool. And you and I are out all the time doing these talks, meeting with hundreds of marketers and business leaders. And the reality is like people just don't really comprehend what ChatGPT is capable of doing. Like
Mm.
most people just think they go in and they kind of use it like a search engine or they ask it to write something and they're not really thinking about the depth of all the capabilities it has and really pushing it and experimenting with it and trying. And I think this is a great example with this image technology. Once you have access to it, don't just go in and like give it a photo and say like
Mm.
analyze this for me or like what's going on or like really think about a series of use cases. Kind of like when Mike, when you and I talked about how we demoed Duet AI on Google in a past episode,
Hmm.
and we went in with like specific use cases in mind. And so that's what I would recommend off the bat here is like, if you're a marketer, if you're a business leader, if you're really in any profession, really think about these tools and go into it with, all right, I've got 5 ideas of how I'm going to test this thing and see what it's capable of. So, for example, with the image. So let's say you can upload any image to ChatGPT and it can analyze this thing. And I have seen some demos of people who have this already, and it's incredible what it's
Mm.
able to do already. But for example, say you gave it a Google Analytics chart or any kind of marketing data chart and said, analyze what's going on in this. It can do it. It can read the text. It can interpret the images. So you might have a way where we're going to use this as an assistant to analyze charts and data. You mentioned product descriptions, giving it photos, writing descriptions. If you run an e-commerce store, Like
Mm.
imagine the ability to say, here's 100 products, like write the descriptions for these. Photo captions is another one that comes to mind, whether social media posts, articles, like whatever you're using these and you need to write captions. Like here's a photo, what's going on in it, write a caption. Explaining visual concepts. So this is one that immediately came to mind because I happened to be reading the research report that Ethan Mollick and the team did on that BCG study we were talking about, where they a couple weeks ago, where they analyzed
Yep.
758 consultants and the increase in performance using GPT-4 or not. And this research report had these charts in it that, like, I've looked at these things 5 times and I can't actually understand what in the world the charts are showing. And so, like, that would be one where I would say, okay, just throw it in ChatGPT. I'm obviously not smart enough to figure out what they're trying to represent here. Like, what is this chart saying? That would be an example of how I might use it. Um, the other one that came to mind here was customer support, customer service. So there's a few examples I've seen of companies that were built to analyze images. So in the insurance side, for example, if there's a car accident, the ability for the AI to look at the photo and analyze what happened, the amount of damage, and what the replacement cost is, or what the
Mm.
cost to fix it is. I have something like this in my Tesla app. So if you have if there's a defect in your car, you upload a photo through the Tesla app, and I assume they're using some form of computer vision to analyze that thing. But right now, you have to like probably invest millions of dollars to build a tool to be able to do that, whether it's for product defects or car accidents or insurance claims or whatever it is. But this seems like those vertical solutions may be in trouble in the not too distant future. Because if you have this general purpose model that's able to analyze pretty much anything, you start to wonder about like what is the future of these vertical solutions.
Mm.
Um, so those are kind of the things. And then like another example that kind of goes back to our past, we used to have a client that was in the roofing industry, commercial roofing. And so one of the things they do is they look at on all these flat roofs, like on Targets and Walmarts, like there's these drains on top of these roofs. And some of these drains in some older buildings could be, decades old, and you can't tell what the brand is anymore. So now imagine just being able to take a photo of that drain, and it just immediately analyzes it and says, yeah, this is a drain from 1965. It's, from this manufacturer, and you can now match that drain. So I think you're going to see, we talk a lot about AI opening up new possibilities and innovation and like entirely new ideas to reinvent industries. This is the kind of tech to me that when you put it in the hands of people who have domain expertise,
Mm.
they start looking at their industry differently and saying, oh my gosh, like we have been doing this manually all these years. Like, what if we can now just take a photo and it tells us what to do? So those are some of the things that like immediately jumped out to me as potential use cases. But again, as you highlighted, this is all going to be about experimentation. It's going to be
Mm.
about the people who are out in the frontier testing this stuff and finding use cases, kind of like we did what last week's episode when we talked about Andy Crestodina and like him using ChatGPT for SEO. That's what needs to happen is like these people who are experts in their field finding the use cases, because OpenAI is not going to like say, hey, marketers, here's the 25 use cases for this thing. Like they don't care. They're just pumping out the innovations.
Yeah, what also jumped out to me is we've talked in the past about how useful tools like this can be for as strategy assistance. And I
Yeah.
think this capability takes that to just a whole new level. I mean, you mentioned here analyzing charts and explaining visual concepts. Well, how many times have you and I like slammed our head against a whiteboard for 3 hours and it just looks crazy? And we're like, all right, take a photo of it. We'll get this into a cleaner format. Like we can just do that now and have it fill in strategic gaps and say, hey, we're still trying to figure out this part of a customer journey or a business plan. That becomes really interesting to me. We could do that before with words, but it takes quite a bit of time to
Correct.
describe what is just there in an image. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think that's really interesting. I'll be very curious to see as well any type of web development and design. This kind of harkens back to that first, I believe it was the first GPT-4 demo, where they basically wrote on a piece of paper what a website could look like, and then it can create it. This is the promise of that. We could literally sketch out in 2 seconds how we want a homepage of our app to look and say, hey, I'd like you to attempt to code me a prototype.
Yep. Yeah. And I actually saw demos of that, of people doing it for that kind of thing. And I agree 100%. Like if you're you're standing at the whiteboard and you're like, okay, here's conceptually what we think needs to happen. Here's how the customer journey is going to go here, or here's how the learning journey is going to go for this audience. And you like get a model in place and it's like, and it's because so many times, like I'm sitting in my office basement at 11:30 at night on a Saturday trying to like conceptualize something, and you just need to talk to somebody or like think
Mm,
it through. And I'm not going to bother you at 11:30 on a Saturday. So you're like, okay, let me just like get this concept, take a picture, put it in ChatGPT and say, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I have so far. What should I be thinking about? Or how should I do that? And to actually like interact in a strategic way, like you're saying, that's the stuff that to me is like, what if? Like, I mean, it sure seems like maybe that's what we're entering into. And now you really get into the situation where the the professionals who figure out how to use these tools to do that kind of stuff, how they're able to just leap their peers in terms
mm.
of like capabilities and utilization of these tools. So I think this fall, as I believe they said it was going to start rolling out over the next couple weeks to
I think
ChatGPT
so.
Plus and enterprise users. So probably by the end of October, we're going to start seeing some really cool ideas of how to apply this technology. And so I think that's the action item for everybody is when you get access. Well, one, if you don't have ChatGPT Plus yet, pay the $20 a month. Like seriously, like this, you need to be able to experiment with this technology. So get your ChatGPT Plus account if you don't have it, and then once you get this technology, start experimenting with a series of use cases in mind. Like you're going to get more use cases as you're going and testing it, but like have some ideas in mind and then start paying attention to the people who are out in the frontier, really pushing the limits of what these things can do and getting inspiration for your own ways to apply this to your career.
So, talk to me a bit about possible use cases and your thoughts on this voice assistant capability for ChatGPT. I was pretty blown away how strongly Kevin Roose in the New York Times was like, yeah, this thing, blows Siri and Alexa out of the water.
Yeah, I think we for the last, 5, 10 years have been waiting for voice assistants to truly be assistants and not just like give you the weather and, sports scores and like those fundamental things. Like I always complain a lot of times in the morning, like my kids will ask me questions. My kids are fifth and sixth grade. So like on the ride to school, we'll have conversations about like totally random stuff like black holes and just like things they'll ask me about. And it's like, or how far is the moon from the earth if you see the moon in the morning, like things like that. And you like ask Siri, because it's the obvious thing while I'm driving, hey Siri, and it'll like say, I found 3 links. And it's like, that's not the point. I'm driving. I wouldn't have asked you if I wasn't driving. I can't click on the 3 links. So this idea that like whether it's Apple solves it finally, or whether it's Pi, because like Inflection Pi, you already have the ability to have voice conversations, or if it's, OpenAI and ChatGPT, like someone has to solve an actual assistant that you can have a conversation with and learn things from. And we know that OpenAI's Whisper technology is incredible. Their transcription technology, their voice to text, like the ability for their technology to understand human voice and transcribe it is incredible. And if that's the basis for this, which I believe it is, then it's pretty interesting. And it, really starts to lead down this path of what do Amazon and Apple do?
Mm,
Are they improving their own technology? We're going to talk about Amazon's investment in Anthropic. I saw an article from Rob Towes, in Forbes, I think it was, where he was like theorizing who buys who.
mm.
And one of them was like, well, maybe I think it was Apple buys Inflection Pi and then just uses Pi to replace Siri. So I think what we're going to see is a rapid escalation of competition in this space because everybody's trying to do. We're going to talk about Meta next. Meta's got these capabilities. Apple has them. Amazon has them. These startups are building them. So I think 2024 maybe is the year where voice finally like starts to become what we've thought it was going to be all these years. And, maybe that's something we need to start thinking and talking more about is where voice is going and what are the implications to businesses.
So, zooming out as we wrap this topic up, the fancy term for these are multimodal assistants.
Yeah.
They're in multiple modalities. They're able to interact, through text, through images, through voice. What are the bigger implications here on like my career or my company having access to something like this?
I really think we're at the very beginning, and we do know that the next iterations of these models are going to be multimodal. The word is that that GPT-5 will be multimodal from the ground up. So what we're seeing right now is a language model built in a traditional way to do text that they're layering in these other abilities on top of. The rumor is that the next version of GPT from OpenAI will be built multimodal from day one. My assumption is that is what Google is doing with Gemini, their next model that's supposedly going to be more powerful than GPT-4. So we've known that multimodal, as you called out, is the future of these things. That was like the given of what happens next. There's always this like, well, where do we go next with this technology? Multimodal, the ability to take in and output images, video, audio, text, code, all of these things. That's what these models are going to be capable of. So what are the implications to us in business? It's like that's the $1 trillion question. Like, what does this do to the way we work? What does it mean to different industries? Um, you know, you really have to sit down and start projecting out on an individual company or industry level. It's very hard for us to prognosticate, like broadly speaking, horizontally across all industries to make some blanket statement about the impact it's going to have. But I think what it is the leaders in different industries who get there first and test this technology, they're going to find the ways to reinvent their own industries, whether it's accounting or law or agencies, marketing agencies, HR, finance, whatever it is. That's what I think 2024 is really going to be, is not only these multimodal models being available to us, but innovators, entrepreneurs finding ways to reinvent industries with this technology mixed with AI agents, which we've talked about before, about these machines being able to not only output things, but then take actions. So the example you gave of we need to build a site or we need to build this journey, not only can it help us visualize the concept. So we start with an idea as the human, we put that idea into the engine, it comes back, help us hone that idea. Then once the idea is more fully baked, say, okay, build it for us, generate the code to create this page, this
Mm.
site, this campaign. Okay, now go in and build that campaign. Like that's what we're going to have in the next 12 to 18 months is not only a strategic assistant or an ideation engine, but we're going to have agents that can help us do the work. And that's the part, again, we keep talking about the business world isn't ready. They're absolutely not ready for this multimodal world where the agents can take actions on our behalf. Um, when you talk about that stuff on stage, I don't know if you've done this, but like in the last couple of weeks, I've said this stuff on stage. I've shown examples, and you can hear a pin drop in the room. Like, and then when you say like this isn't sci-fi. This isn't 5 years from now. I'm like theorizing this could be like this is tech today. We're gonna have these capabilities, and people just like stare dumbfounded at the screen. And then you get the people who come up afterwards. They're like, "How is this possible?"
Yeah.
So that's I think we just can't stress enough on this show is like we're not talking about 3 to 5 years out, like guessing. This is pretty predictable stuff that's going to come next because everyone's working on it. So, just like we always say, get through the fear and the uncertainty and the anxiety of it and just go experiment. It's the only thing we can really do is experiment and then connect the dots yourself.
And like we've mentioned, I realize and I very much sympathize with the fact that people are so overwhelmed generally, but also in this domain.
Yeah.
Yes, even go experiment, but here's your next step. Go buy ChatGPT Plus,
Yeah.
plain and simple, and go spend an hour a day getting very, very good with it over the next 30 to 60 to 90 days. That's your step.
Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, like I did a talk. Well, it was Tuesday morning. I was in Miami and then I flew to Austin Tuesday night and I had a buffer day Wednesday in Austin. And then I had a talk Thursday and then I flew home like late Thursday night. Wednesday night, I actually hit a point where I was like, this is too much. Like I really was personally starting to feel like I just couldn't even process everything that had happened. Like I mentioned earlier, like I wasn't even sure I should change my decks. I wasn't sure like how do I even like the meta stuff. Like I'm like, oh my God, like that's what we're gonna talk about next. It's like this was the part that started putting me over the edge. It's like I can't even process all of this. So just know like I feel it too. Like maybe it sounds like we got this all figured out because we have a show about this stuff, but It's a lot, and, like, I sympathize greatly with the people we present to and talk to and meet with because I felt overwhelmed last week, and I live this stuff 24/7. Like, most people listening to this show have full-time jobs with responsibilities related to things that aren't AI, and they're trying to moonlight and solve for this. So, Mike and I, like, get it totally, and, like, yeah, so I mean, when we're talking about this stuff, just know like we're trying to figure it out ourselves, but it's a lot even for us. So if you ever are feeling overwhelmed, like just welcome to the club. And the only thing I can figure out is like one, try and synthesize it, break it down into parts that are digestible. And then as we keep saying, just play with the tools. Pick one. Like we talk about all this stuff. We're going to talk about Meta next. Meta just announced a whole bunch of stuff. If you only have a few hours a week, just go hard with ChatGPT Plus. Like that's my number one advice. I always tell people, like, where should we start? Just get good at ChatGPT Plus. Like it'll train you to get good at everything else that's coming online. If that's all you can do is experiment a little bit, then just do that.